Hey, I'm Sooper. Welcome to my Meltdown. So I've been trying to come up with an idea for my next video after I had just finished a bunch of movies about monster genre movies. And I was having trouble coming up with what should be the next thing. And then a thought came into my head and it would not go away. Did you ever notice that The Crow and Robocop are the same movie? That's it. That's the whole argument I have. Just kidding. There are a lot more. Because I've watched these two movies so many times, and my brain is full of this stuff instead of useful things like speaking a second language or drawing things well. So I know this comparison sounds a bit ridiculous on the surface, but hear me out. And yes, before you go into the comments to actually me, I have read the Crow graphic novel. I know that James O'Barr started writing and drawing it in 1981, so it couldn't have stolen stuff from a movie that was written 5 years later. But that's not what I'm saying at all. I don't think anyone copied anyone here. It's just a long set of coincidences that I can't stop thinking about. Also, a lot of these similarities were things they changed or added for the movie The Crow that were not in the original comic. Honestly, the Crow and Robocop movies have more similarities with each other than the Crow movie has with the Crow comic book, and you will see what I mean. This is definitely a weird niche topic. I haven't ever seen anyone else talk about it, so either I'm really onto something or I've completely lost my mind.
Both is good.
Both movies are about a man murdered by a street gang who then comes back to life and gets revenge on his killers. And if that's where it ended, I could just easily say, oh, these are both just remakes of High Plains Drifter. But there's so much more to it than that. So let's start with, both movies are set in Detroit, but not actually filmed in Detroit. The Crow was filmed in Wilmington, North Carolina, and Robocop was filmed mostly in Dallas, Texas, and Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Both characters have repeated and disturbing flashbacks, not just of their own death, but there is that, but also of their happy life beforehand, and in both cases, the flashbacks are so painful that it causes them to lash out violently. While walking through their respective homes and having these flashbacks, Robocop punches a computer screen and Eric punches a mirror. The scene in The Crow is extra cool because as it builds up to the punch, the soundtrack slowly fades into Burn, a Cure song that was recorded specifically for this movie. And it's just a really great song from a really good soundtrack album. The original comic featured an older song of The Cure's, The Hanging Garden, but they wanted to record something new for the movie, and it fits into the scene so perfectly. There's speculation that the reason they didn't want to use the song is that their former drummer and other instrument player, Lowell Tolhurst, had played on it, and they had fired him a few years before this, and he then sued them over it, so there was a bunch of seriously bad blood between them. I don't know if that is necessarily true, but it's speculation. Also, the Nine Inch Nails cover of Dead Souls for this soundtrack is not bad, but the original Joy Division track is better, Don't At Me. Both of the death scenes in these movies intentionally evoke crucifixion imagery. The gang in both movies that murders the main characters is a colorful, quirky group that is bickering among themselves. They're your stereotypical street gang who can't just kill anyone. They've got to overkill at all times and laugh hysterically while they do it. And then they also both enjoy blowing up entire city blocks and storefronts. It turns out, in both cases, that they are pawns of a powerful businessman who runs crime in Detroit. The leader of each of these gangs has a big, gas-guzzling muscle car which gets spectacularly crashed with the driver inside. Also, both have the requisite nightclub scene and Scarface amounts of cocaine. You've got a guy in Robocop repeatedly yelling, "fuck me," when he realizes he's fighting a giant cyborg, and a guy in The Crow yelling, "shit on me," repeatedly when he shoots Eric in the chest and it heals instantly. I also don't want to necessarily get into why that guy is yelling that repeatedly at Robocop. Does he have a cyborg fetish? I don't know. I don't want to kink shame. Both movies have the main bad guy kill another bad guy who is not part of the gang. And this is a weaker example of these similarities, but I'm committed at this point to this whole thing, so I might as well go for all of them. Now, there is one bit that is almost a similarity, but it isn't because they cut some plot elements from the final release of The Crow. In the final cut, Eric loses his invulnerability because they're able to steal the crow that provides his supernatural powers. But the original version that they scripted explained that Eric's powers were only meant for him to get revenge on the people who murdered him and his fiancée. And when he knowingly breaks that rule to help Sarah's mother, Darla, and then later to rescue Sarah, his powers are taken away. There's a cut fight scene between Eric and Funboy where his powers stop working because he helped Darla, and Funboy cuts him up badly with a straight razor. There are a few remnants of this in the final cut of the movie, like his hands and torso being taped up with electrical tape and slashes in his trench coat that are not explained. And then there's a line that Sarah has about how Eric can't be her friend anymore because she's still alive. A few little things like that are just still in there but don't go anywhere. Personally, I think that was a better idea for why he's vulnerable at the end, and it makes more sense. And with the Funboy fight scene, it added a nice setup and payoff of the limitations of his power. But the entire sequence involved an additional character from the comic, the Skull Cowboy, and exposition of that concept, which they did film some of, but they cut because they hadn't filmed most of those scenes when Brandon Lee tragically died during filming, and they overall felt like it also didn't flow well with the story and just made the entire thing too long. All that to say that Robocop had a similar plot point where Robocop has a rule coded into his programming that says he can't arrest an executive of the company that made him, and it attempts to shut him down when he breaks the rule. Both characters have a police officer sidekick who helps them remember their own past and assists them in the final fight. They both get shot in the chest during that fight, but survive. Eric and Robocop both meet up with one of the gang members who killed him. They recognize him and are terrified because we killed you.
I know you. You're dead. We killed you!
There ain't no coming back. This is the really real world. There ain't no coming back. We killed your dad. There ain't no coming back.
Eric and Robocop have a massive shootout with the bad guys where they just empty entire magazines into him, which he does not worry about because he can't be hurt.
Come quietly or there will be trouble.
Ah, fuck you!
I just want him.
Well, you can have him.
After which he kicks everybody's asses. The bad guys have basically this same line after firing a ton of bullets into the guy at one point.
Doesn't hurt! Doesn't hurt!
That ain't dirt.
Both heroes get impaled in the torso during the climactic fight, which is also possibly a Christ metaphor for the Roman soldier who pierced Jesus with a spear during the crucifixion. And they both defeat the real villain of the story with the memories they've gained during the film, leading to the bad guy falling from the top of a very tall building in an overhead shot. And finally, both of these movies have sequels that didn't involve the original writers or director that I saw in a theater and wished I hadn't. Both films also had a Canadian-made TV series continuing the story. They both also have theoretical reboots in the works, but they've been in developmental hell for a good while with rotating directors and stars attached that have all left. So who knows if either of them will ever be made. There has been one remake of Robocop, but it's weird and I don't want to talk about it. These movies used mostly practical effects wherever possible. Neither of them had a really big budget, and CGI was barely a thing anyway. So they did practical effects models, rear projection for background stuff and matte paintings, squibs, and a ton of fake blood. The Crow did use a very small number of digital effects due to Brandon Lee's accidental death when they were nearly done filming, to essentially paste his face onto a body double, and a few short shots of Eric healing bullet wounds. The directors, Paul Verhoeven and Alex Proyas, respectively, have specifically described both of these films as westerns. And yes, there are differences between the two, but you have to admit that's a lot of similarities.
These are the same two movies? You weren't paying any attention.
Robocop has a more satirical tone, while The Crow is a very serious, gothy horror action flick. But I'm hard-pressed to think of two movies with such different tones and no people involved in both of them that still follow all of these details. And none of this is to say that either of these are not good movies. I really love both of them. And despite all of these coincidental details, they both feel at the same time deeply unique and have something to say about the world and life. And I feel like some of this is even more relevant now than it was when they were released.
I like it!
I could poke a few holes in them both because I've seen them so many times. Mostly I'm still just impressed by how well they're both shot, edited, scored, acted. Like, both of these have seriously good casts. Robocop has Peter Weller, Nancy Allen, Ronnie Cox, Miguel Ferrer, Paul McCrane, Kurtwood Smith, Ray Wise. I was watching a behind-the-scenes thing for Robocop, and Ray Wise mentioned having part of his wardrobe for the movie still in his closet at home, wrapped in plastic, and then added, just like Laura Palmer. And I just about died laughing because I was not expecting an extremely dark Twin Peaks reference in a Robocop publicity video. And The Crow has Brandon Lee, Michael Wincott, Ernie Hudson, John Polito. It's got Tony Todd, the freaking Candyman. Both of these casts just worked really well. Neither of these were giant budget productions, but they found a way to do a lot with a little. And both of them had some very big production issues that they managed to pull off. Making these two films that are now classics with a big following is kind of amazing. If there's one thing I want to poke at about The Crow, it's how many times they end a scene with a freeze frame shot, because they do it several times, and I feel like I'm watching the end of The Breakfast Club. So that's the end of this video. If you liked it, hit the like button, because the YouTube algorithm feeds on those, and your soul. See you next time for more of me overthinking things and analyzing them to death. Until then, thanks for coming to my meltdown.